Hey everyone, Mr. Kipsing here, and today we are looking at something called measures of central tendency. So the idea with this is that typically when we look at the people around us, we kind of like to compare ourselves to what's normal, or what's like the typical score. A great example of this is like for exams, we're really interested in what the average is going to be, right? So test scores. Otherwise, things like height and income, people tend to always like to compare themselves. And there's three common ways that we'll look at in this lesson. We're going to look at the mean, the mode, and the median. Now, you've probably seen these before, but the thing I want to talk about is that we're not only going to calculate them, we're actually going to look at them in different contexts and using something called the frequency tables and how it changes when you do that, okay? So the mean, as you've seen before, we just add up all the scores and we divide by how many there are. There's a formula there for you to represent. Let's just do a little brief one over here. Here's an example. So if we've got 4 students at a table and their heights are given here, we want to find the mean, mode, and the median, right? Okay, so for the mean, remember we have to add that all up and then divide by how many there are. So let's go ahead and do that. This is for part A. And I'm ending up with a pretty nice number. I'm ending up with 176. So that's in centimeters. Now there's a few ways to remember what all of these represent. So for the mean, there's an A there, so I remember that's the average. The mode, there's an MO at the front, so that stands for most often, or in French, I found out recently that it means fashion. So it's like, what's the most common thing that's going on there? And median, or if you think about like a median strip, that's in the middle of the road. So basically, that's going to be what's in the middle of your data set, right? And they're all talking about stuff that's typical and centered around something, but they do it in different ways, right? So for example, for the mode here, I can see that 165 is occurring the most times, so that's going to be my mode there. And for part C, the median, again, what I want to do is I want to make sure, okay, first of all, is my data set ordered? And they are in this case, which is nice for us. Now, the thing you have to be wary of is, okay, even though it's ordered, because I have an even number of values here, like if you circle all these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? What's going to be in the middle, right, actually isn't in that data set at the moment. Right? And the reason why is because the idea is that the median is going to split this into 2 equal groups, 2 groups of 3, actually, right? So the way you do this is that you need to look at this and say, okay, well, if I need something in between these 2 values, in between 165 and 187, what I have to do is I have to take the average of those 2 values, okay? So we can go ahead and do that, and we get 176 as well, turns out. Cool. So it turns out in this case that the median is the same as the mean, and that's like a special situation. That's not always going to happen there, but that's pretty cool. All right, so that's all well and good. Now, one thing we need to consider as well is, all right, what about if I represent this in a table, okay? And so if I do this in a table, it's still a similar process, but we're given different information, right? Have a look at this one over here. There's a formula, I'll come back to that, that's at the top here, but I'll come back to that in a second. So for the following now, we want to find the mean, the mode, or the modal class, I'll explain what that is, and the median again, right? So the idea is this, if you look at the table over here, you'll notice that now, instead of getting like actual numbers like we got at the top here, we just get this represented in a table. And the issue with that, I suppose, is that, okay, what's this actually saying? What do I actually need to do here? How do I find the average? Well, usually you would add up everything and divide by how many scores there are. And you could actually do this over here, right? You could look at this and see, okay, if this is the number of hours students play sport, well, there were 3 students that did 1 hour, right? So if there are 3 students that did 1 hour, then I guess I could write it out like this. This is the data set over here, right? There are 3 students who did 1 hour. There were 2 students who did 2 hours. There were 10 students who did 3 hours, right? And so you can see where this is going. This is very time consuming, and we don't actually want to write this all out in the same way that we did before, because there's obviously a lot more numbers here now, right? So there's a bit of a shortcut. If you think about adding up all the numbers that are here, right? 1 plus 1 plus 1, that's going to give me 3. 2 plus 2, that's going to give me 4. 3 plus 3 plus 3, 10 times, that's going to give me 30. Rather than having to write out the whole data set individually, all you have to do is take this idea. In this column, they give you a heading, score times the frequency. So the score is whatever you're working with, so hours in this case, and the frequency is how many times it occurs, right? And that's actually what this formula means over here. The mean for a frequency table, this symbol here is sigma, and that means sum. So the idea is that we're going to add up all of these values when we multiply them together, and then we divide by the total sum of the frequency. So let's go ahead and fill this column here, right? So I basically want to multiply these two values together. So 1 times 3, that's going to be 3. 2 times 2, that gives me 4. 3 times 10, that gives me 30, and so on. Let's fill this out. And you can see that's effectively the same thing as doing these calculations here if we were to add them all up, right? And so at the end of this, I'm going to add up all these numbers and see what I get. So the total number of values there, that's going to be 23 in my calculations, and the score times the frequency, that should be 74 is what I've got here, okay? So for part A, we're asked to find the mean. So let's go ahead and do that. For part A, we're asked to find the mean. So the mean is going to be 74 divided by 23. And we get a number with nice decimals over here, 3.21739. And let's just round that to 1 decimal place. Okay, so that's the mean number of hours that students play sport. The mode or modal class. So the modal class will apply in a second, but we're just looking for the mode here. And that looks like the one that's the most frequent is this guy. So 3 hours. 3 hours is the mode. Okay. Part C, let's have a look at. Now part C, we're looking at the median. So again, same idea, right? How are we going to find the median here easily? I guess the issue is that before with the previous example, there's only a small number that we could count. But here, there's like 23 different numbers. And I don't want to have to add them or put them all in order and then go ahead and find it that way. So there's actually a bit of a shortcut. And the shortcut is this. Basically, you can find the position of the median very quickly using this formula. N plus 1 divided by 2. Okay, so this gives you the position of the median. It doesn't tell you the median's value, but it tells you where it's going to occur. So where n is the number of the total number, let's do an arrow here, the total number of numbers, I guess, to put it lightly. And so basically we've got 23 numbers. If I add 1 to that, that brings me to 24. I'm going to divide by 2. That takes me to 12. And so I'm going to go to the 12th number when they're in order, and that's going to be my median, right? So if I go ahead and look here, I can see, so that takes me to 5, and then see if I go to the 3, and I add another 10 on top, that's 15, right? So a better way to show this would be through a cumulative frequency column, right? So if I've got 3, and then I add 2 to that, so I'm just kind of adding all these numbers on top, 15, 19, so adding the 4, and adding the 3, that gives me 22, and then adding the 1 gives me 23. So I'm looking for where the 12th number occurs, right? And that would occur in between, so that's the 5th number, and then I go from 6 to 15, that's going to be this one over here. So the median is going to be 3 then. Okay.